Johnny Carson might have been the king of late night, but not even royalty is immune to crossing the line. While millions tuned in for laughs and charm, there were moments, especially with female guests, that left people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some called it flirtation. Others saw it as flat-out inappropriate. Now, before we dive in, let's be clear about something. Times were different back then. What flew on television in the 1970s and 1980s would get you canceled faster than you can say inappropriate workplace behavior today. But that doesn't mean we can't look back and acknowledge when things crossed a line. And honestly, there were several moments when Johnny Carson made his female guests visibly uncomfortable on national television. From suggestive remarks to awkward silences, here are the times Johnny Carson went way too far. And just wait until you see what he said to guest number 5. Madonna gets the third degree about her outfit. Madonna arrived on The Tonight Show in 1987 at the absolute peak of her powers. This was the woman who had revolutionized pop music, turning herself into a cultural phenomenon that transcended music itself. She wasn't just a singer, she was a statement. Madonna controlled her image with an iron fist, using fashion and sexuality as tools of empowerment and artistic expression. She was provocative on purpose, challenging society's expectations of how women should behave and present themselves. By 1987, Madonna had already released multiple groundbreaking albums. Like a Virgin had shocked and captivated audiences worldwide. True Blue had topped charts globally. She had starred in Desperately Seeking Susan and proved she could act. Her Who's That Girl tour was selling out arenas across the planet. Madonna wasn't just another pop star. She was redefining what it meant to be a female artist in the music industry. She wrote her own music, controlled her own videos, and made decisions that male executives told her would ruin her career. And she proved them wrong every single time. So when she showed up to Johnny's show wearing something typically Madonna-exposed and boundary-pushing, you'd think the conversation would focus on her music, her tour, or her incredible rise to superstardom. Instead, Johnny zeroed in on her outfit and asked her to explain what she was wearing. He put her on the spot, essentially making her defend her clothing choices on national television. Madonna handled it like the professional she was, but you could see in her eyes that she wasn't thrilled. She dealt with this kind of thing her whole career, people focusing on what she wore instead of what she accomplished. The difference was that usually, she was in control of the conversation. In Johnny's chair, she was on the defensive. She had to justify herself to middle America, explain her choices, and essentially apologize for being Madonna. The woman who had built an empire on not apologizing for anything was being asked to do exactly that. Zsa Zsa Gabor and the cat situation. Zsa Zsa Gabor was Hollywood royalty, though not in the traditional sense. She didn't win Oscars or star in blockbuster films. Instead, Zsa Zsa made herself famous through sheer force of personality. She was glamorous, funny, and unapologetically herself. With her Hungarian accent, her multiple marriages, and her quick wit, Zsa Zsa became a talk show fixture precisely because she was entertaining and unpredictable. She was one of the first people to become famous for being famous, and she did it with style. But Zsa Zsa's fame wasn't just about being seen. She was genuinely witty and could hold her own in any conversation. She had survived World War II in Europe, had been crowned Miss Hungary in 1936, and had navigated the complicated waters of Hollywood as a foreign actress in the 1950s. She spoke multiple languages, had lived on multiple continents, and had stories that could fill volumes. Zsa Zsa was also a successful actress in her own right, appearing in films like Moulin Rouge and Touch of Evil. She knew how to work a room and how to work a camera. During one of her appearances on The Tonight Show, Zsa Zsa brought along her pet cat. Animals on talk shows are always a bit of a wild card. They do unexpected things, and that's part of the fun. During the course of the interview, Zsa Zsa asked Johnny if he wanted to pet her cat. Standard enough question, right? Except Johnny added a condition. He said sure, but only if she moved the cat away first. Let that sink in for a second. The innuendo was crystal clear. Johnny was essentially saying he wanted to touch her, not the actual cat. It was a sexual joke delivered with that boyish Johnny Carson grin that usually got him out of trouble. The audience laughed because, well, that's what audiences did. Johnny had a reputation as a bit of a flirt, and people generally found it charming. Zsa Zsa had cultivated this image as a glamorous, flirtatious personality, But that didn't give Johnny license to make overtly sexual comments toward her on television. There's a difference between playful banter and sexual harassment disguised as humor. Zsa Zsa's persona was something she controlled. It was part of her act, part of her brand. When Johnny made comments like this, he was taking that control away from her and using her image for his own purposes. She became the object of the joke rather than being in on it. Dolly Parton and the salary comment. Dolly Parton is a national treasure. Let's just establish that right up front. She's one of the greatest songwriters in country music history, having written classics like Jolene and I Will Always Love You. She's a savvy businesswoman who built an entertainment empire including Dollywood, her theme park that employs thousands of people. She's a philanthropist who has donated millions to literacy programs and funded vaccine research. Dolly Parton is the full package: talent, brains, beauty, and a heart of gold. Dolly's songwriting abilities alone should have made her untouchable in terms of respect. I Will Always Love You has been recorded by countless artists, with Whitney Houston's version becoming one of the best-selling singles of all time. Jolene is considered one of the greatest country songs ever written, with its haunting melody and emotionally complex lyrics. Dolly wrote both of these songs on the same day. She's written over 3,000 songs in her career, and many of them have become standards that will be sung for generations. Beyond her music, Dolly has always been a pioneer. She fought for creative control of her music when women weren't given that option. She turned down Elvis Presley's request to record I Will Always Love You because his manager demanded half the publishing rights, and Dolly knew the song was worth more than that. She was right. She's made millions from that decision. She started her own production company, her own record label, and eventually her own theme park. Dolly Parton didn't just break glass ceilings, she shattered them. But in 1977, when Dolly appeared on The Tonight Show, none of that seemed to matter to Johnny. Instead, he told her directly that he would pay a year's salary to see her naked. Just imagine that for a moment. Here's this brilliant artist sitting across from him, and that's what he decides to say, on television, to millions of viewers. Dolly, being Dolly, handled it with grace and humor. She spent her entire career dealing with people who underestimate her because of her appearance, and she's developed a razor-sharp wit to deflect these kinds of comments. But she shouldn't have had to. This was one of the most talented songwriters of her generation, someone who had written hundreds of songs and built a career through pure talent and determination, and Johnny reduced her to a sex object. The comment was particularly galling because Dolly has always been open about the fact that she crafted her image deliberately. The wigs, the makeup, the outfits, they're all part of a persona she created and controls. As she's said many times, it costs a lot of money to look this cheap. She's always been in on the joke. But Johnny's comment wasn't acknowledging her artistic choices or her agency. It was just objectification, plain and simple. He saw a woman with a famous figure and decided that was worth commenting on, regardless of everything else she'd accomplished. Betty White and the nudity sketches. Betty White was America's grandmother before she was actually old enough to be most people's grandmother. She had been working in television since the medium's infancy, literally appearing on experimental broadcasts in the late 1930s. By the time she became a regular presence on talk shows, Betty had already proven herself as a comedic genius, a pioneering producer, and one of the most versatile performers in Hollywood. Betty's career was nothing short of remarkable. She started in radio in the 1930s, transitioned to television in the 1940s, and never stopped working. She was one of the first women to produce a sitcom, creating and starring in Life with Elizabeth in the early 1950s. She won Emmy Awards across multiple decades, a testament to her enduring talent and relevance. Betty could do it all: sketch comedy, sitcoms, game shows, dramatic roles. She was a chameleon who made everything look effortless. Betty was game for anything, which was part of her appeal. She had this wholesome image but wasn't afraid to push boundaries with her comedy. She could deliver an innocent line and a bawdy joke with equal skill. So when Johnny Carson's show included her in sketches involving nudity, Betty probably went along with it because she was a professional who understood comedy. But here's the problem. Betty White didn't need to be in sketches about nudity to be funny. She was brilliant at physical comedy, wordplay, timing, and character work. Putting her in situations that focused on nudity, even in a sketch comedy context, felt like a waste of her immense talents. It was like having a master chef at your disposal and asking them to make toast. Moreover, It played into this uncomfortable pattern of older women in Hollywood being subjected to jokes about their bodies and sexuality. Betty was funny because she was funny, not because of anything related to her physical appearance. The nudity sketches reduced her to her body when her comedy brain was the real treasure. Betty White could get a laugh reading a phone book. She didn't need to be in sketches about being naked. It felt like a lazy comedy that took advantage of her willingness to do whatever was asked of her as a professional. What's particularly sad about this is that Betty was such a good sport about everything. She never complained, never made a fuss, never suggested that maybe she deserved better material. That was Betty. Always professional, always gracious, always putting the show first. But just because she didn't complain doesn't mean it was okay. She deserved sketches that showcased her considerable talents, not ones that reduced her to her physical appearance. Lucille Ball and the virginity question. Lucille Ball. Is there anything that needs to be said about Lucille Ball? She was one of the greatest comedians who ever lived, male or female. I Love Lucy wasn't just a successful sitcom, it was a cultural phenomenon that changed television forever. Lucy and Desi Arnaz pioneered the three-camera setup that's still used today. They fought for creative control at a time when performers had none. Lucille Ball was a brilliant physical comedian, a shrewd businesswoman, and a trailblazer who opened doors for every woman in comedy who came after her. Before I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball had already had a long career in Hollywood. She had appeared in dozens of films throughout the 1930s and 1940s, though she was never quite able to break through to major stardom. She worked steadily, honed her craft, and developed the physical comedy skills that would later make her famous. When television came along, Lucy saw an opportunity that many film actors dismissed. She and Desi fought the network for creative control, eventually forming their own production company, Desilu Productions, which would go on to produce hits like Star Trek and Mission Impossible. I Love Lucy revolutionized television. The show was the first to be filmed in front of a live studio audience using 3 cameras, a technique that became the industry standard. Lucy and Desi insisted on filming in Los Angeles rather than New York, which was unheard of at the time. They owned their own show, which gave them control and made them wealthy. The show's popularity was unprecedented. When Lucy gave birth to little Ricky on the show, more people watched that episode than watched Eisenhower's inauguration the next day. Lucy's physical comedy was unmatched. The famous chocolate factory scene, where she can't keep up with the conveyor belt and starts stuffing chocolates in her mouth and down her shirt, is still one of the most iconic moments in television history. She wasn't afraid to look ridiculous. She would cross her eyes, make absurd faces, get covered in food, whatever the scene required. But behind the silly exterior was a brilliant mind. Lucy understood comedy timing better than almost anyone, and she was a perfectionist who demanded excellence from herself and everyone around her. So when Lucy appeared on The Tonight Show in 1974, Johnny had an absolute icon sitting across from him, someone who had shaped the very medium they were working in. And what did he ask her? He asked her about when she lost her virginity. Just let that marinate for a second. One of the most accomplished people in the history of television, Johnny decided the appropriate question was about her history. It's such a jarringly personal and inappropriate question that it's hard to understand what he was thinking. This wasn't some young starlet trying to build a provocative image. This was Lucille Ball, a woman in her 60s, being asked about her virginity on national television. Lucy had spent decades crafting comedy that was brilliant, physical, and completely non. Her genius was in her expressions, her timing, her willingness to look ridiculous for a laugh. She slipped on banana peels, got locked in freezers, and stomped grapes. Her comedy was universal and family-friendly, and yet Johnny decided to steer the conversation toward her life. The question was disrespectful on multiple levels. It was invasive, asking about something deeply personal. It was reductive, ignoring everything she has accomplished in favor of focusing on her sexuality. And it was simply weird. There was no good reason for that question except perhaps Johnny's misguided attempt at being provocative or edgy. Lucy deserved so much better than that. Sophia Loren and the Garter Incident. Sophia Loren is one of the most celebrated actresses in cinema history. This isn't an exaggeration. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress, the first actor to win an Oscar for a non-English language performance. She worked with the greatest directors of her era, from Vittorio De Sica to Charlie Chaplin. Sophia Loren represented European sophistication and classic Hollywood glamour, all rolled into one incredibly talented package. She was taken seriously as an actress, respected for her craft, and admired worldwide. Sophia's rise to stardom was remarkable. Born in poverty in Rome during World War II, she entered beauty pageants as a teenager to help support her family. She was discovered by producer Carlo Ponti, who became her mentor and eventually her husband. Her early films in Italy showcased her beauty, but it was her dramatic performances that made her a star. In Two Women, she played a mother trying to protect her daughter during World War II, a raw and powerful performance that earned her that groundbreaking Oscar. What set Sophia apart was her ability to be both glamorous and real. She could play sophistication and earthiness with equal conviction. She worked in Italian cinema, Hollywood productions, and international co-productions, proving her versatility. Directors loved her because she brought depth and intelligence to every role. She wasn't just beautiful. She was a serious actress who understood character, emotion, and storytelling. Films like Marriage Italian Style, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, and A Special Day showcased her incredible range. Sophia also had to fight against being typecast or reduced to her physical appearance. Hollywood wanted to use her beauty, but she insisted on being given real roles with substance. She turned down parts that were just eye candy and held out for characters that had depth. She was willing to look unglamorous if the role required it. She understood that her beauty could open doors, but her talent was what would keep them open. When she appeared on The Tonight Show in 1979, Johnny Carson decided it would be a good idea to gift her a red garter on camera. A garter, a piece of intimate apparel that's typically associated with wedding nights and burlesque shows. He presented it to her during the interview, creating what can only be described as a supremely awkward moment. Think about what that gesture implied. Johnny was essentially referencing Sophia's appeal and undergarments on television, in front of millions of viewers. This was a woman who had earned international acclaim for her acting ability, who had worked with the most respected filmmakers in the world, who had become a symbol of Italian cinema. And Johnny's idea of honoring her presence on his show was to give her lingerie. Sophia Loren handled the moment with the grace and poise she'd displayed throughout her career, but the awkwardness was palpable. What was she supposed to do with this gift? How was she supposed to respond? It put her in an impossible position where any reaction would be dissected and judged. If she laughed it off, she might seem like she approved of being treated as a object. If she expressed discomfort, she might be labeled as humorless or unable to take a joke. Johnny Carson's legacy is legendary, but even legends have their flaws. Which moment shocked you the most? And do you think he ever went too far? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age.